I think that when it comes to understanding the nature of reality, we have a problem that is very big and very fundamental, and it involves the way that we categorize the unknown. We have this backwards relationship with the unknown, and it causes us to have this inverted or backwards view on reality. And as a result, we are in this weird situation similar to Plato's cave where we are slaves to our own perspective. It's very similar to the analogy of a baby. I don't know if you've ever interacted with a baby or a small infant, but if there is something interesting that you want them to look at and you point at it with your finger, the baby doesn't look in the direction that you're pointing, but instead, they become fixated on your finger. No matter how intensely you point, the baby just sits there perfectly entertained by the movement of your hand. Something like that is happening to us on a fundamental level, and I think that it has something to do with what we commonly call the unknown. On this channel, I refer to it as the mystery, and I do this intentionally to sort of give it a proper title because the main point that I try and drive home on this channel is that the unknown isn't some abstract hypothetical concept, but rather it is a noun. It is real. But this is where it gets tricky. The unknown isn't real in a sense that it's everything that's already out there that we simply haven't known yet. This is actually the exact opposite of how you should look at it. I think that the best word we have for it today is some kind of strange dimension. And to view the unknown as things that are already out there but not yet discovered is the same as the baby becoming fixated on the finger. It is the same as being within Plato's cave. You are using your own limited perspective to come to grand sweeping generalized conclusions about reality. In order to explain this idea, I often refer to the phenomenon of a singularity, not that I'm some kind of mathematician or scientist, but rather to show that this thing that I'm trying to point to is quite literally beyond math and science. And this term singularity can be used in all kinds of different contexts, but a singularity is this strange, undefined mathematical object that appears and breaks logic. Whenever we are trying to solve difficult problems using logic, many times there is this threshold reach where the math stops mathing, the logic ceases to make sense. And as this occurs, these singularities begin to pop up. As a matter of fact, I believe that many of the Millennium Prize problems are riddled with these singularities. And what a singularity signifies is that whatever it is we are trying to understand or apprehend, we do not yet have enough insight to clearly see it, to clearly define it. You can think of it as an empirical postmarker on the limits of human understanding. Human understanding and singularities have this sort of antithetical relationship, and as a result, that means that we can never catch it. As you illuminate one singularity, as you increase your understanding, at the same time, it is moving away from you. As you solve one problem that was previously blocked by a singularity, another one pops up somewhere else. It is like this elusive fairy that you can never catch. And as a result, we have this weird, paradoxical situation where understanding has been decreasing at the same rate that it has been increasing. Because as understanding increases, the more that we are able to know, the more questions that we are able to ask. I've used this example before that if you imagine it as the diameter of a circle, that on the inside of a circle you have the known and on the outside you have the unknown. As the diameter of the circle increases, as the known increases, so does the contact with the unknown. Although I do believe that that analogy doesn't quite do the situation justice, but you can just look at our institutions of knowledge, look at science, math, There was a point in history where if you knew basic arithmetic, you were considered one of the smartest people on the planet. But now these subjects have gotten so advanced that they have become completely esoteric. You have to study for half of your life to even be considered to have an opinion on these subjects. I mean, have you ever tried to read or follow one of these research papers? It starts off in English and then shortly after it goes into straight up schizophrenia. But the main point here is that despite all of this progress, the ratio of known and unknown remain similar, if not the same. We have just gone from 100 of the world's smartest people trying to answer 100 questions to 1,000 of the world's smartest people trying to answer 1,000 questions. We've gone from discovering that we are just one of countless planets to this realization that we may be one of countless universes, countless realities. And there appears to be no end in sight. Because if knowledge was finite, or in other words, if we could somehow know or learn everything how people try and imply today, we would see the distance between us and this singularity decreasing. We would be getting closer to it, but that doesn't appear to be the case. We appear to be locked in a fixed position. We are on this treadmill of asking and answering our own questions, where we are making progress and going nowhere at the exact same time. And I believe that there is a strange reason why this is occurring, why things are this way. And it is one of the main principles on my channel. This main thing that I'm trying to point to or get across is that this singularity that is out in front of us that we can never seem to catch, it is an it. It is a noun. It is a thing in and of itself. Now, what kind of thing is it? That's really up for debate. Is it a place? Is it an entity, some kind of being? Language really begins to fail you as you try and address it. It is unlanguageable. It literally is the unknown. It is where the known comes from. The best word for it that I can come up with is a kind of dimension. That appears to be the best term that allows the most wiggle room for most theories. It is some kind of domain of infinite possibilities. It is where everything exists before it actually becomes a thing. I know that this obviously doesn't make much sense trying to describe it with language, but it is infinite. This is why we are never able to close the distance between us and it, while we are never able to reach it. It is like Zeno's paradox. The more you try and muscle your way to it, it will just continually feed you more and more context. It will answer more and more of your questions. And ultimately, we will go extinct before we reach it. The catch here being is if we try and muscle our way to it, if we try and learn or logic our way to it, the way that this appears to work is that first there is the unknown, first there is the mystery, and in an attempt to understand it, logic flows out of it. The closer that we try and get to it, we sort of pick up the logic that it leaves behind. Logic to it is like the pixie dust that falls out of a fairy, and you may just be thinking, this guy has an overactive imagination and he has just lost it. But the fact that we have an imagination at all is evidence of this concept that I'm trying to explain. You don't see that the imagination and the unknown have a sort of handshake style relationship, a key and lock style relationship. The imagination is like the oars on our boat that we use to navigate the sea of the unknown. It is like a new sense or a new set of eyes or a third eye, which is what this channel is named after, that we are able to use to see into a different dimension. What the unknown is a domain where everything is undefined. Everything is possible. And what the imagination is, it is an exploration of possibilities. I always say this on this channel that if you knew everything, there would be nothing left to imagine. In the same way that your two eyes in your skull have evolved for hundreds of thousands of years to have depth perception, to be able to see 3D space, perhaps the imagination is some kind of new faculty where we can see, if you want to call it 5D probability space, I have no idea, but it is a new kind of space. Or perhaps it is an old kind of space, a very old kind of space, something that is ancient, primordial. There is something very old inside of it that has something to do with us. This is the trippy portion of all of this, if it hasn't been trippy enough yet. There is something about the unknown where it is reactive. It is intelligent in some way. There is something that lives inside of it. It is as the famous quote says that when you stare into the abyss also stares back at you. I'm sure many of us have experienced this, especially my older listeners, that when confronted with the unknown, it starts talking to you. Things such as your fears, your hopes, jokes, possible futures. All of these are things that come up in this hypothetical conversation, this allegorical conversation. And the kind of response that you're always going to get to this type of dialogue, this type of situation that I'm bringing up with other people is that it's just your unconscious mind. It's your unconscious mind being projected onto whatever situation that you're in. And people often say this to try and trivialize or marginalize what's actually taking place. You know, people read the Red Book or a few books by Jung or Freud, and they become these experts on psychology. But I think that when people say this, they don't fully understand what they are admitting. For starters, we both start from the same assertion that when we encounter the unknown, we are indeed encountering a mind of some sort. Now, what is the nature of this mind? This sets the stage, I guess, for what I really wanted to get at in this video. This has all been a sort of 12-minute introduction. The unconscious. What is it? This is a word that we often throw around, but when you hold it under a microscope, it doesn't really paint the complete picture. There is a key component missing that I believe many people don't want to accept or deal with in their minds, that this idea of the unconscious. It isn't something that we possess or have. It's actually the other way around. It is something that has us. To give some context on what I mean by this or where I'm going is that this whole concept of the unconscious, its biggest proponents are psychologists, psychiatrists who have this inherent anthropocentric bias. And though people may not want to deal with it, there is this growing understanding, this growing consensus that other animals are conscious too. We actually, believe it or not, share this planet with other species of creatures. And we would have a hard time justifying why we have a unconscious and other animals don't. If our emotions, our beliefs are stored within our unconscious mind, and we actually have a collective unconscious as a species, animals experience a wide range of emotions as well. They experience fear, etc. Where are their emotions stored? Where is their structure for their psyche? There obviously isn't a such thing as a psychologist for a cow, a psychologist for an otter. I believe that the unconscious, this thing that we describe as the unconscious, is a universal phenomenon that has obviously only been seriously studied or understood within the human animal, the human species. Because the human species appears to be the only animal that is aware that it's there. For whatever reason, we are able to have a relationship with it, the same way that we are able to have a relationship with the unknown. And I don't think that that is coincidental. As a matter of fact, I believe that this dimension or domain of the unknown and the unconscious are the same thing. At the very least, they may be linked. We interface with the unknown via the imagination, and suspiciously enough, we interface with the unconscious via dreams. I hope you are able to connect these dots here that the imagination and dreams are expressions of this same action. As a matter of fact, they both take place within the same part of the brain. The imagination is often described as daydreaming, and they both involve this exploration of some kind of strange possibility space. It is a state where there is this heightened sense of what's possible. You can view it as a kind of gradient where the closer you get to this domain, the more things become possible. And the further away that you are, things become more defined. Things actually become things. We kind of see this with light cones. You can view it as the future, that the further out into the future you try and see, everything becomes possible. Anything can happen. It becomes completely chaotic. And the closer that you get to the present moment, everything gets kind of squished into one point. And likewise, there is this foundational, primordial layer of reality that everything emerges from. I have called it magic. I have called it the absurd. I have called it potentiality. I have called it chaos, but they all more or less mean the same thing. It is all the unknown, and it is ultimately where everything comes from. As the Carl Jung quote states, that consciousness does not create itself, it wells up from depths unknown. I have just taken this analogy and extended it out to all of reality because I ultimately believe that all of reality is consciousness. If you want to be scientific about it, I guess you could call it some kind of field. It is some kind of factor that animates everything. There is this grand cosmic dream that is occurring, and we are a human portion of it. This thing that is transpiring within the human species is some kind of weird stage of consciousness. Consciousness does not have a genus or a species. It is the stage of consciousness that is the important factor. That I am not a primate talking to you. You are not a primate listening. There is some kind of consciousness that is within a primate body right now that we are all experiencing. Or in other words, to put this as down to earth or as scientific as possible, this level of intellect is available to any organism that has the proper equipment. It just so happens that in this timeline, in this reality, the primates got to it first. Perhaps in some alternate reality, it was the chickens that learned to do trigonometry. It's kind of like that TV show Star Trek, how they go to these different planets and there are these different intelligent life forms there. And once you realize this, the true absurdity of the situation finally sets in, and you can see that reality is pretty trippy. We are in some kind of Alice in Wonderland situation. This is some kind of collective dream by some cosmic mind. This is why unfettered contact with the unknown changes you, and it runs the risk of you seriously losing your mind. We see this with the psychedelic experience, with theomania and things like that, that one of the telltale signs that someone is going through psychosis or is insane is that they lose the ability to distinguish real from fake, fiction and fantasy from reality. Because as you contact the unknown, you see that there really is no such thing as fantasy. Quite literally, anything is possible, and we are just one of those possibilities. It isn't coincidental that when you look at paranoid schizophrenia, conspiracy theories, and I'll even be bold enough to say, the belief in deity, God, that it always starts where the unknown begins to seep into our reality. It's always some deep far off galactic entity. It's always some deep trenches of the ocean that we'll never be able to reach. It's always underneath your skin. You know, if I could just see underneath my skin, I could remove the chip. It's always some hidden folded dimension that we can't quite reach. It's all in the imagination, but the big catch is that the imagination is real. This device that you are listening to me on was in someone's imagination, and they pulled it out and shared it with all of us. But to wrap this video up, there is this giant existential stew, this chaotic ocean of potentiality that is beneath our feet, over our head, in our minds. I don't know where, but there is this grand cosmological dream that we are inside of. We are these lucid dreamers. And the thing that I mean by lucid dreaming is not that we can control the dream. The interesting thing about having a lucid dream is that you can't really control the dream, but suddenly you can control yourself. Things stop happening to you as a passive witness, and you can actually react to things. You essentially start paying attention, which is what consciousness is. It is what all of these things that we call things, this is what they are. They are attention. Everything floats up from the chaotic sea of reality and becomes what we experience as experience, things, knowledge, information, patterns, memory. I have talked about all of these terms. Or you can think of it like this, that in our normal day-to-day life, this waking world, this quote-unquote real world, everything is solidified. There are standardized rules. If you say something contrary to the laws of physics, you get locked up in an insane asylum. But every night, we all go to a different place where things are less stable, less defined. All of a sudden, the laws of physics are malleable. And to go deeper than this is to enter a state where there literally is no such thing as rules. You become unbounded. You know, there's an 8-hour sleep, and then there's the big long sleep, you know, the dirt nap. Attention appears to sort of solidify things, and I think that it has this strange impact on time, and that's going to be the next topic on my members' videos. I am quite overdue over there, so if you are a member, have patience with me. I am adjusting to my new apartment. I'm going to end the video here. I have gone on quite long. I know that during this time of year, the holidays, you can begin to feel a bit depressed and feel a bit cold. It is that time of year. So hopefully this video is able to grant you some solace if you are experiencing those types of feelings. And until next time, y'all have a blessed day.